Beyond the basic interview questions, candidates will also be asked competency-based questions, and these are always centred on the role itself. Is it possible to prepare for these?
That comes down to really understanding what the job is. And the best way to do that is by really understanding that job description and the core competencies that are required for that job. And then coming into the interview prepared to speak to each one of those competencies. For one, your experience in performing that particular, whatever that job requirement is. They'll talk about your experience performing that, but then also be prepared to perform it. So some employers may even break out a particular software. Like if you're a project scheduler within the oil and gas industry, one of the top softwares is a Primavera P6 for scheduling. So perhaps even making sure that you're prepared to open up that software and run it. And I know that sounds kind of rudimentary, open up a software, but that in itself is actually, I've had that happen externally with candidates that were going into that position. The employer asked them to open up the software. They were unable to. So just making sure that you've actually got the competencies that are required in that position and being prepared to prove it in real life, even if they break out a computer and ask you to open up, a particular software or Excel and run a formula or review some data, just being ready to do that.
I think one thing to bear in mind when you're doing competency answers is you have to explain really clearly what the situation was, how you applied yourself and demonstrated that particular skill, and then what the outcome was. And it's important to break it down into those sort of sections when you're answering, because sometimes interviewers will score you on the way you've answered each section. So make sure you break it down and it's quite a structured answer.
Cool. So some candidates like to prepare notes to take into their interviews. Does it bother you if candidates bring notes in?
Yeah, for me, absolutely, because it just shows lack of preparedness. You don't want a robot, or you don't want to be robotic coming in and literally having a script from your mind. But what notes show me is they really don't know from, in their mind or in their heart what they're talking about. If you got to reference notes, then it's not truly ingrained in you. So if it's not truly ingrained in you, well, study the heck out of those notes. It is ingrained in you, but by the time you get to that interview. And there's an old saying that says, fake it until you make it. But I actually heard on a TED Talk that was a great modification of that saying, that was fake it until you become it. And that really resonated with me because, you fake it until you become it. You study, you prepare, you train, you act like you are what you're going in to interview for, and eventually you will become that.
It doesn't bother me, no, because I think it shows they have prepared. And like I say, a lot of people have brought in examples of their work, which I think is also useful to see. So no, I think it just shows that you've done some research. Obviously, if you look down and refer to your notes all the way through the interview, then you're not making eye contact with the interviewer, which can be an issue. But if you want to just bring them with you and refer to them occasionally, I don't see that as a problem.
Okay, so what would you say impresses you the most about a candidate?
What impresses me most is body language. The way the person comes in, presents themselves, sits in a professional manner, upright, eye contact, openness, and preparedness really in their body language.
When they come for interview itself, I think it's important to turn up a few minutes early. You should never really turn up late for an interview. Do make notes, and if you want to bring them in or if you want to bring examples of your work, I think that's always quite impressive. Make sure you dress smartly and you look like you really have made an effort for the interview itself. And always give a smiley welcome and a firm handshake. I think that's always a good sign as well when you first enter a room.